Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. The faucet in the upstairs bathroom had been leaking for 3 weeks. That night, I finally got the nerve to fix it. I shut off the water, opened the cabinet, twisted the valve, only for the wrench to slip out of my hand and slam straight into my thumb. I cursed under my breath, stumbled backward, and heard a voice downstairs. Laughter. I paused. She wasn't supposed to be home yet. Her monthly girls' night out usually lasted until at least 1 a.m. And it was barely 11:40. I heard the jingle of her keys tossed in the bowl, the creak of her heels on the floorboards, and then her voice, low, soft, but not alone. Someone was with her. I slipped out of the bathroom, careful not to make a sound, and moved to the top of the stairs. Our house has this weird architectural flaw. A square vent near the stairwell that carries voices between floors like some kind of gossip tunnel. And what I heard next, I wish I hadn't. God. Being around him feels like sitting in lukewarm water. You're not cold, but you're definitely not comfortable. She chuckled. He asked me last week if he was boring. I didn't even lie. I told him yes. I told him he was the human version of a sigh. I felt my knees lock. She was talking about me. No hesitation, no bitterness, just casual disgust. Like she was reviewing a disappointing TV show. The guy with her laughed. A man. Definitely not one of the girls. I gripped the railing to stay steady. Then she said something that broke the floor beneath me. I can't stand him anymore, Lucas. I genuinely can't. But it's convenient, you know? Rent's cheaper when you split it with a shadow. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't storm down the stairs or kick the door open. I did something worse. I turned away. I went back into the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the closed toilet seat, and stared at the cracked tile for hours. The 3 a.m. She tapped gently on the door and asked if I was okay. I told her I fell asleep in there. She said, "You're so weird," and walked away. That was the last thing she ever said to me in our house. The next morning, she woke up to silence. I was gone. No note, no fight, just vanished. She thought I was boring? She had no idea what was coming next. I didn't sleep. I sat in my car for 5 straight hours in the grocery store parking lot with the engine off and my thoughts louder than the silence. I could still hear her voice echoing through that stupid vent. Human version of a sigh. Over and over. I replayed it like a cursed voicemail. My fingers were numb. My stomach twisted into knots, but I didn't cry. Crying felt too dignified. I just sat there, paralyzed. I kept thinking, if I was so easy to ignore, would she even notice I was gone? Around sunrise, I drove to a cheap motel on the edge of town. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions. She gave me a room with flickering lights and a stained comforter, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I dropped my bag, collapsed on the bed, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning like it was mocking me. That afternoon, I turned off my phone and left it off. I didn't want to know if she noticed. I didn't want to see her texts or worse, not see them. I just wanted the world to forget I existed. That would be fair, right? Since I apparently didn't exist in her eyes anyway. But here's the thing. I couldn't fully disappear. Not yet. Something inside me needed to see it for myself. To catch one last glimpse of her reality without me. Maybe I wanted proof she was unaffected. Maybe I wanted pain. Maybe I was just still the same weak man she described to Lucas. Either way, I went back. 3 nights later, I returned to the house. Not to talk. Not to scream. Just to observe. I still had the garage clicker. I parked 2 houses down and waited until her bedroom light turned off. Then I crept inside like a stranger in my own home. Everything was still the same. The dishes I'd washed were stacked neatly. The tea box was on the counter. Her shoes were in the same exact position by the door. It was surreal. Like time had frozen the moment I left. But it hadn't. Because on the living room table sat 2 wine glasses, a phone charger I didn't recognize, and a shirt. A man's shirt. Folded sloppily on the armrest of my couch. I wasn't surprised, just hollow. I stood there for a long time, unable to move, until the hallway creaked. I ducked into the coat closet, closing the door just an inch before the hallway light flicked on. I saw her shadow stretch across the floor. She walked in, barefoot, wearing the gray shirt that had definitely never belonged to me. She looked around, confused. Not alarmed, just confused. As if she thought she heard something, but only faintly. She stood there for a few seconds, then shrugged and walked into the kitchen. I was right there, hiding, holding my breath behind a row of winter coats. I watched through the crack as she poured herself another glass of wine, leaned on the counter, and casually smiled down at her phone. That was the moment I finally broke. But not the way you'd expect. I didn't storm out of that closet. I didn't confront her, didn't call her names or ask why she did it. Instead, I waited. I listened to the soft clink of the wine glass against the counter, the buzz of her phone vibrating with new messages. Probably from him. I stared at her bare feet, her relaxed shoulders, her complete calm. She looked like someone enjoying a quiet evening at home. Not someone who'd thrown away a marriage without saying a word. That's when it hit me. She never thought I'd leave. She didn't have to break my heart with a confession or an affair. She did it with silence, with comfort, with routine. That made it worse. When she finally walked back upstairs, I slipped out. But not before I left something behind. On the kitchen table, I placed my wedding ring next to the second wine glass. I didn't write a note. I didn't want her to have my words. She never cared about them anyway. I wanted her to feel something unfamiliar. Absence. Real, haunting, echoing absence. Back at the motel, I stared at the ring imprint still visible on my finger. I thought about the version of me she hated, the one who asked too many questions, the one who tried too hard to understand emotions, the one who made tea with exact instructions because it made her feel cared for. Was that weakness? Or had I just handed my heart to someone who didn't know what to do with it? The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 22 missed calls. 8 texts. The first ones were casual. Hey, where are you? Did you leave early or something? Can you pick up oat milk? Then they shifted. Thad? Seriously, what's going on? You left your laptop. Are you okay? Why is your ring on the table? I didn't respond. She tried calling again that afternoon. Then again at night. Then it stopped. For 3 days, nothing. Until a message arrived from a number I didn't recognize. You think you're clever? Running off and playing victim? You're pathetic. It wasn't signed. But I knew who it was from. Lucas. The man in my house. The man who, apparently, had the confidence to insult me on her behalf. That's when something shifted inside me. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was something colder, deeper. A quiet determination that I didn't even know I was capable of. I had been passive for years, always the one to yield, to compromise, to overthink. But now I had the one thing neither of them expected me to have. Leverage. Because while they were busy laughing about my weakness, they forgot something crucial. That hallway vent? It didn't just carry sound one way. And that night in the closet, I'd left my phone recording. I had every word. And I wasn't going to disappear anymore. I kept replaying the audio on my phone. Not because I needed to hear it again. I already had every word memorized. But because it reminded me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't exaggerating. I didn't imagine her contempt. It was real, it was sharp, and now it was mine to hold like a shard of glass. I didn't have a plan yet, not a real one. But I knew I wasn't going back to being invisible. The next evening, I booked a different motel across town. I paid in cash. No trace. I needed space to think. When I opened my email, I noticed something strange. A message had landed in my inbox earlier that day, titled, "You should know what she's really like." At first, I assumed it was spam until I opened it. There were photos taken from inside a car, clearly a phone camera. One showed Mirabelle walking out of a restaurant with Lucas, hand on his chest, her lips close to his ear. Another showed her leaning across a table, laughing like she hadn't in months. The final one, the two of them in my driveway. She was giving him a key. There was no name, no explanation, just a final line. "She's been lying for longer than you think." My heart didn't race. It slowed, like time was stretching out around me. Someone was watching them. Someone who knew me, or at least wanted me to know the truth. I stared at the images for a long time, numb, before zooming in on the last one. The key in her hand was silver. That was my key. One of the two I gave her when we first moved in. She didn't just cheat. She let him in. Welcomed him like I was already gone. I scrolled back through my phone, through the call log, the text threads. I had never seen this anonymous number before. No area code I recognized. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because suddenly, everything was falling into place. The reason she started locking her phone. The last-minute plans. The weird excuses to go for walks at night to clear her head. And most of all, the way she never really fought with me. She didn't argue. She didn't complain. She disconnected, slowly, so she could slip out of the relationship without the mess of confrontation. It was so clinical, so neat, like peeling off a bandage after the wound had already healed. I turned the motel TV on, muted. I watched the news anchor's mouth words I couldn't hear, while my thoughts raced louder than anything they could have said. She thought I was weak because I didn't fight back. She thought silence meant surrender. But now I had something more dangerous than anger. I had clarity. And I had allies I didn't even know about. Someone was watching her. And they wanted me to do something about it. I didn't sleep that night, not even a little. I just sat by the motel window, watching cars drift in and out of the parking lot, while the anonymous photos kept burning in my inbox like they were alive. Who sent them? Why help me? The sender hadn't followed up, hadn't replied to anything. Not that I dared to message them. I was too paranoid, too uncertain. What if it was a trap? What if this was all some twisted joke? Still, the timing was too precise to ignore. Someone was watching her, watching them, and now I wasn't the only one quietly collecting evidence. By noon the next day, I made my first real move. I drove back to our house, not to confront her, but to plant something. I had bought a $39 voice-activated recorder at a local electronics store that morning. I taped it under the kitchen table, the place she always gravitated to for her late-night wine sessions. Then I left, quickly and quietly, like a thief. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want her to see me. All I wanted was proof. Real, undeniable proof that she had chosen someone else long before I walked out. 2 days passed. I spent them at the motel, listening to the hum of other people's lives through the paper-thin walls. I kept checking my email, hoping the stranger would send more, but nothing came. I started to think maybe they'd said all they needed to. Maybe now it was on me. On the third evening, I returned for the recorder. She wasn't home, her car wasn't in the driveway, and the house lights were all off. It was risky, but I moved quickly. I grabbed the recorder and left before she or he could show up. Back in the motel, I sat on the bed, heart pounding, as I plugged in my headphones and pressed play. First, there was just silence. Then the click of the back door opening. Footsteps. The soft pop of a cork being pulled from a wine bottle. Her voice. I think he's gone for good this time. Another voice. Male. Calm. Confident. Finally. You've been feeding him crumbs for months. What did you expect? She laughed short, almost embarrassed. I thought he'd cling a little longer. He always used to. So what now? He asked. Do I finally get to stop sneaking around like some side character? There was a pause. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. Let's just be careful, okay? He's not confrontational, but he's observant. The last thing I need is for him to grow a backbone now. They both laughed. Then came the words that flipped something dark inside me. I mean, if he comes back, we'll deal with it. Emotionally, he's already gone. The rest is just logistics. The recording ended a few minutes later. But it was enough. More than enough. She didn't just betray me emotionally or physically. She dismantled me. Piece by piece, behind my back, like I was some minor inconvenience she forgot to throw out. A background character in her new, improved life. But she made one mistake. She assumed I wouldn't do anything. She assumed wrong. The next morning, I sat in a diner halfway across town, sipping lukewarm coffee that tasted like regret. The recorder was in my pocket, and the voices from the night before still echoed in my head. She really thought I'd never come back. She'd handed my life over to someone else like I was furniture being donated. And the way they laughed about me, like I was disposable, forgettable, it wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. I stared out the window, watching people walk by with their coffees and backpacks and earbuds, and I felt invisible in the same way I had felt in my own home. But not anymore. Something had shifted in me. A switch flipped. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I wasn't going to beg for scraps of dignity. I was going to take it back. All of it. On my terms. I pulled out my phone and opened a new email draft. I attached the audio recording and the photos the stranger had sent me. I didn't add a subject line. I didn't write a message. I just entered one email address, hers, and hit send. Let her hear it in her own voice. Then I packed my things and checked out of the motel. I didn't go far. I drove to the park 2 blocks from our neighborhood and waited. I knew her schedule better than anyone. She'd be home by 6, and she always checked her phone while unlocking the front door. I sat in my car, engine off, windows cracked, eyes locked on the street. At exactly 6:07 p.m. her car turned the corner. She pulled into the driveway like it was just another Tuesday, got out with a canvas bag of groceries, and paused. Right there, mid-step. I could see it the moment she opened the email. She stopped walking. She looked at her phone for a long time. Then again. Then she turned in a full circle, like someone had tapped her on the shoulder but no one was there. Her head darted up toward the street. I ducked slightly in my seat, heart hammering. She looked spooked. Really spooked. She went inside fast, nearly slamming the door. 2 minutes later, my phone vibrated. I checked the screen. Thad, we need to talk. Please. I didn't respond. 5 more messages came in over the next hour. One long apology. One asking where I was. Another demanding to know who recorded her. Then a voice message I didn't listen to. Finally, a last text. You don't understand the full story. That one almost made me laugh. Because now she wanted to explain. Now she wanted to fill in the blanks. She wasn't scared of what she'd done. She was scared someone had been watching her do it. But that's the thing about secrets. Once you expose one, the rest start to unravel on their own. And hers were starting to rot in the light. That night, I muted my phone. Not because I didn't want to see her messages. Believe me, I read every one of them. But because I wanted her to feel the weight of my silence. She had talked so casually about replacing me. Now she could sit in that house, wine glass in hand, wondering if I was watching again. Wondering how much I knew. Wondering if I was going to expose her. That was the part she feared most. Not the betrayal, not the guilt, but the possibility that someone else might find out what she really was beneath her curated life. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I visited my parents. I hadn't told them anything yet. I just needed familiarity. A place that didn't smell like lies. My mother hugged me too long, noticed the weight I'd lost, asked if everything was okay. I lied, said I was just working too much. She always worried, and I wasn't ready to unravel the mess yet. Not until it was finished. Later that day, as I was leaving their house, I saw another message from Mirabelle. Please, I need to talk to you. Not in text. 10 minutes later, a call came through. I didn't plan to answer. My thumb hovered over the reject button. But something inside me, it wasn't curiosity, it was darker than that, wanted to hear her voice. I picked up but said nothing. At first she stayed quiet too, just breathing. Then finally she said, You don't get to do this. You don't get to disappear and then spy on me and act like you're innocent. That was her opener. No apology. No remorse. Just a wounded ego lashing out. Still, I didn't speak. I let her fill the space with her spiraling guilt. I never meant for things to get that far. Lucas was just a distraction. It didn't start that way. I was lonely, Thad. You were so distant. You stopped trying. There it was. The classic pivot. I was to blame for her betrayal because I didn't entertain her enough. Because I didn't dazzle her like some Instagram reel. You think you're so clever recording us? She said, her voice rising. Who else did you send it to? Was it just me? That told me everything I needed to know. She was scared. Not of me, but of exposure. She thought I'd sent it to someone else. Maybe her boss. Maybe Lucas's wife. That paranoia was growing now, eating her from the inside. Still, I didn't answer. After a long pause, she said, softer this time, "Thad, you were always too sensitive. You read into everything. That's why we ended up like this." I hung up. Took everything in me not to respond. Not to scream. But that silence? That was louder than anything I could have said. A few hours later, I got another message. Not from her. This one was from the same anonymous number that had sent the original photos. Only this time it came with a video. It was footage of Lucas, leaving the back door of our house with a second phone in his hand. And what he did with it changed everything. The video shook me more than I expected. Not because of what Lucas did, but because it confirmed what I already feared. The clip, recorded from a parked car across the street, showed him slipping out of the house with a second phone. My old phone, the one I thought I'd lost months ago during a trip. I'd replaced it without much thought at the time, never considering that someone might have kept it. And worse, used it. In the footage, Lucas walked around to his car, popped the trunk, and placed the phone inside a metal case. He looked over his shoulder once, cautious, like someone who knew he was crossing a line. Then he got in the car and drove off. That was it. No drama. Just the quiet, methodical actions of someone hiding something. Couldn't breathe. He hadn't just been with my wife. He'd been recording me. My messages, my data, maybe even my location. For how long, I didn't know. But now I understood how he and Mirabelle always seemed one step ahead. How she knew when I'd be gone. How he knew what to say to push my buttons. It hadn't just been betrayal. It had been manipulation. But that video, it gave me power. I forwarded it to a private investigator I had quietly contacted a few days earlier. I gave him everything, texts, audio, footage, the works. I told him I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. Legally. Clean. I was done being the emotional wreck everyone laughed about behind my back. I wanted peace. And the first step toward it was letting go of people who thrived on chaos. Within days, he found more. Lucas had a record. Nothing major, just enough to paint a clear picture of the kind of man he was. A few sealed restraining orders, some shady financial activities under alternate names. Enough to make Mirabelle panic once I quietly forwarded the files to her email with no note, no subject line. She tried to call. I didn't answer. Tried to meet. I never showed. In the end, I filed for divorce on grounds of infidelity and emotional abuse. I kept the house. I stayed calm. I followed the legal path. And I never once raised my voice, not because I was weak, but because I was done playing their game. The real twist? Weeks after it was finalized, I received a letter in the mail. No name, just a message that read, "She wasn't just cheating on you. She was cheating herself out of someone who would have loved her for life." That was enough for me. Now I'm in a new apartment. Small, quiet, no hallway vents, no tea rituals. But every morning I wake up, breathe deep, and realize I am finally alone with the only person who ever tried to protect me. Myself. Thanks for sticking with me to the very end. If you were watching closely, what moment in this story made you go silent? Comment below. Let's talk. And don't forget, this is Reddit Confessions, where the loudest endings are born from the quietest exits.